Hey, this is Carlos Cavallo from datingfire.com and datingadviceguru.com. Welcome back. You ever wonder what to say to a guy, how to talk to a guy, how to reach a guy? Sometimes it seems like there's nothing but styrofoam packing inside his head. I get it. I've been there myself in my own life. But there are ways to talk to a guy to get him to really feel for you, to really feel that attraction. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about some phrases to make a guy fall for you and how to melt your man's heart. Stick with me. And when it feels natural and oh so good, why don't you do the big three? Number one, like and subscribe. I got some great stuff on this channel. You're going to want to get more. Make sure you turn on notifications, that little bell indicator next to the subscribe button. And number three, if you have any questions or comments, any of that stuff, leave it in the comments section below. And give me any feedback to any of the stuff you hear today. So when it comes to talking to a guy, it can be tricky sometimes. You don't know what to say. It seems like he's talking a different language. It seems like you can't reach him. Look, the reality is that we all have certain languages that we work much better in than other languages. In other words, there's certain things that will get through to our hearts than other things. Now, if you're familiar at all with Gary Chapman's work, he does some work with this whole idea of love languages. In fact, he's probably the most famous that has come out with a book called The Love Languages. There's actually 5 of them. The first is words of affirmation. The second is physical touch. The third is receiving gifts. The fourth is quality time. And the fifth is acts of service. Now, each one of these ways of talking to a person are going to reach different people. And we all have different languages in terms of how we want to receive that love. We hear it differently than most people say it, unfortunately. So let's do a brief review of these love languages so you know what they are, and then we'll get into some of these things you can say. So words of affirmation, if you're going to use these on a guy, they would include things like encouragement, affirmation, basically pumping him up, appreciation, and really listening actively to him. This is something that not a lot of guys get, and it's one of the reasons it's one of the love languages that most guys are very responsive to. The next language is physical touch, and you might think, well, duh, it's not talking, it's actually touching, but it's still a love language. Some people are just going to immediately respond to that. You might be one of those people that when a guy touches you, you immediately feel that surge of those love hormones and that responsiveness in terms of emotions. Some of us have been conditioned for that our whole lives because that's the thing we crave the most. We're just very responsive to touch. The third one, receiving gifts, is again a little less about the words, although your gift could be words, if you think about it that way. And, of course, regular gifts, things that are material that you could give them. Thoughtfulness, basically. These are where you make your boyfriend or your spouse a priority by making them feel special with a gift. The next one, the fourth one, is quality time. And again, this one can include words, but it also is, the main substance of it is your time. How much time you spend with him, how much time you spend together is really important. For a lot of people, this is a big deal because that's how they develop that connection and that bond to them. So uninterrupted and very focused conversation and one-on-one time is super important for the quality time. The last one being acts of service. Well, this is, again, all of these can include words, but the idea behind love languages isn't that they are necessarily spoken, it's that you know how to reach that person's particular way of being. In other words, we all have an open receptor that's waiting for a certain kind of validation. And these different validations reach certain people much faster. So with acts of service, you let them know that you are wanting to help, that you want to help lighten their load, that you want to express to them through action how you feel about them. So again, physical touch being anything from holding hands, doing a shoulder rub, or sitting next to each other, all the way to sexual intimacy. But sexual intimacy is its own form of love language, and it doesn't really necessarily get involved in the physical touch. It can, but it doesn't need to. Words of affirmation, again, telling somebody directly what you appreciate about them. This is really huge for guys, and I'm going to come back to this one. Gifts, again, self-explanatory. It can be small stuff or even bigger stuff, but I'm going to tell you right now, the smaller the gift, the more meaningful the gift, the better. Acts of service, again, this is something that where you do something for him or without being asked specifically, okay? Especially without any expectation of anything in return. And then, of course, the quality time, from being vacations together to just working side by side. This one's also really huge with men because men bond through time shared, okay? I want you to write that down. Men bond through time shared. This is how men bond with other men, and it's how he bonds to you in the friendship and the deeper emotional level of a relationship. And it's really important. Don't overlook it. So learn your own love language. It helps to know your own so that you can explain it to him and let him know what yours is, because obviously you don't want him miscommunicating. What we tend to do is we tend to use the language of our own needs to express it to other people, and it doesn't always match up. In fact, you've only got a 20% chance of it matching up, so you really need to know what the other person's love language is. So know your own so you can tell him, and then find out his so you know how to speak it. So again, these phrases to make a guy melt for you, to melt his heart, to get through to him, they're mostly going to surround what? His ego. That's right. A man's ego is his most important possession, unfortunately. A lot of guys eventually get to the point where they realize the thinness and the insubstantial nature of their ego. But early on, to a good part through a man's life, he's going to be focused on what is it that makes me feel validated as a man. This is huge. You see, men are, this might be hard for you to believe, but stick with me here. Men are more romantic than women are. This is true. This has been proven time and time again with studies. And when I say romantic, you're going to be saying, no way, Carlos, that is so wrong. I am shutting this off right now. No, listen to this. Women tend to be more pragmatic when it comes to relationships. In other words, you're more practical. You're not going to jump in bed right away with a guy until you know a little bit more about him, right? Whereas men, we know how that works, right? Men are more romantic because we attach to the parts of a romantic love relationship that we can relate to. I mean, when it comes right down to it, yes, a man can woo you with those words, but ultimately on the inside, you've got a very strong and pragmatic mechanism that says, no, I got to know what this guy's made of before I let my heart run away with him. Guys fall in love much easier. We tend to fall in love faster and in much less time than most women do. So what are some of the things you can say? Well, again, validating him as a man, of course, is awesome. But here's one of the ways you can do it. You can tell him, I love it when you blank. I love it when you do this. I love it when you do this for me, or when I see you do that for somebody else. That's actually really good too, is to catch him in the act of some of these things that he does for other people. When you recognize what he's doing, that's gonna fire something off in his mind and his heart that it's unbeatable when it comes to making him look at you totally differently. Another really big, really important thing you got to let a guy know is that he's safe with you in a relationship. And the way you do that is through something I call a fear eliminator. You got to let him know that you're his, okay? Let him know that you are actually, I don't want to say possession, but you get the idea, right? When it comes to relationships, we like to let the other person, we want to know the other person is kind of ours in a certain way. We don't want to think of them as being anybody else's, so we want to have exclusivity. That's really what he's looking for. He wants to know that he's safe and he knows that he can be with you exclusively. Just let him know that you're his. Something like, I'm so with you on that, or dude, I am so yours, or you have totally won my heart, or things like that, okay? Any of those phrases are awesome to use with a guy because they let him know that he doesn't have anything to worry about, that you are going to be loyal, key word there, loyal to him, and you're his. In the same way, he will then feel an obligation to give that back to you. So, but again, make sure that these things are all done with no air of neediness or insecurity about them. You've got to keep that out of your interactions with a guy. That's a love killer. And if you want to know how to freeze up his heart, it's showing him that what you're giving him is not it actually has an entitlement to it, that he has to do something to get it. That's not what anybody wants in their relationship or their love. Another really huge one for guys is safety, okay? And he wants to know that he is your protector, that he's the one that is, well, your primary bodyguard, if you want to think about it that way, your love bodyguard. So communicate that you feel safe around him, that he makes you feel that way, that you trust him. And the way you can say that is simply, I love that you protect me, or I love how safe I feel when I'm with you, or I just feel so safe when I'm with you. Here's another one, I'm glad you're on guard. These kinds of things that you tell him make him feel more like the warrior, the hunter, the primal masculine, if you will. That's exactly what a guy wants to feel. And especially in this day and age when people are so confused about genders and their roles in relationships, This is really, really big. Of course, another huge one is sexual prowess. You know it, right? You've got to be able to tell a guy how good of a man he is when it comes to being sexual. And if this means telling him just about his physique, that's usually enough. Tell him how good of shape he is in or how strong he looks. Ask him, hey, have you been going to the gym? I know it sounds like a cliche, but guys fall for it every time. What, me? No, but what do you think? Huh? Any of that stuff is huge in making a guy feel more validated as a man. Again, it comes back to that ego, right? You can also say things like, that makes me so hot, or I feel so alive when I'm with you, I feel so sexual, I feel so open. All of those things, again, they also touch on the trusting element, but mostly on the influence he has over you. That his presence makes you feel more feminine, more alive sexually. Again, anything that makes him feel like the alpha male, the strongest, most dominant male. We are all hardwired for a certain amount of status seeking. Women do it through their social network, through their social ability and social acuity. They don't do it through direct competition most of the time. It's usually indirect competition. With men, it's direct. He wants to feel like he's at the top of the food chain, that he's the head honcho, the big cheese. You know how this goes, right? If he feels like he's that, if he's the alpha to you, he is in, and that's going to awaken something in him. It's going to open up doors for you that you could not get to any other way. Another great way, and this is one of the most important, is just to express unconditional desire and unconditional love for him. You see, it's super simple, but a lot of women don't get this one, and I touched on it earlier. When you communicate that you love a guy without him needing to do it or give you anything back, that he doesn't owe you anything, that's big, because it shows that you are capable of giving without that need to get something in return. And unfortunately, this is something that a lot of guys don't experience in most of their relationships. So if you can express love to him by just saying that you love him, and then in a way that does not allow for him to return the I love you, because then that feels like an obligation, right? If you can just give that I love you to him, or an appreciation of any kind with no expectation in return, that is going to have a big effect on it, because it communicates your social value. And I talk about that much more in my programs, which is really important for you to understand. Look, you can listen to these videos, you can watch these videos all day long, and you're going to get a ton, especially out of my stuff, because I give up so much. But at the same time, you need a complete plan. Taking one tactic, one strategy here and there, it'll help, but it's not going to help you see the big picture. And the biggest picture of all is that you need to understand what men want. When a man knows that you understand him and get him and see him, and you just totally get him to the core, that is the ultimate man melting trigger. That's what men respond to the most. And that woman that does that for us, we fall in love with her the fastest. This is how most women make that unbreakable connection with a guy. So how do you understand him? How do you know what he's thinking? What does he want? How to read his signals? How to know what men deeply need? I'll tell you. Why don't you start off with my free ebook, and if you want, just ask a question about a situation you might be in, because chances are your situation is feels pretty unique. You want to know an answer to a question of where you stand with a guy, knowing whether or not it's worth pursuing. Is this guy going to come back to you? I can tell you that. Why don't you go on over to datingfire.com/Ask Carlos. That's datingfire.com/Ask Carlos. Hey, you can ask me a question, or you don't even have to ask me anything and still get a great free offer here. You can get my free ebook and my VIP newsletter. No charge. Just go to Ask Carlos, datingfire.com/Ask Carlos, and put your email in. You don't have to ask a question, but if you do have a question, put it in there as well. And hey, what do you think about all this? Do you disagree with some of the methods that I've been talking about, or do you have more that you want to bring out and talk about? Leave that in the comments section below. But before you go, do that big three. Number one, like and subscribe. You can keep getting these videos every week. Number two, make sure you turn on the subscription, the notification bell thingy next to the button. That'll make sure you know when the next one comes out. And as I said before, leave me your questions, comments, any of that stuff. Do it down below. Hey, this is Carlos Cavallo from datingfire.com and datingadviceguru.com. Go get your free ebook now. Don't wait. You can come back to the videos later. As always, live and love with passion.